recording. Start webinar. Okay, counting down. Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker with Search Engine Journal. Welcome to today's, I believe it's our first webinar of SEJ webinar of 2023. And today's special guest and sponsor / partner is CopyPress, which we have a long history of working with in multiple ways. So with me today, I have Dave Snyder, CEO and founder of CopyPress, along with Liz Groth, and that is her real last name. Liz Groth, Partner Development Manager at CopyPress as well. So hey, Dave. Hey, Liz. How's it going?
Good, Lauren. Thanks for having us.
Good. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kick the year off with you too. So first of all, before I let you get started, I'm just going to do some basic housekeeping. For those of you that have already attended an SEJ webinar in the past 6 months, we're using this platform called Big Marker. Pretty amazing. You'll see a chat box, which I see a lot of you are already talking in. So if you could just take a moment right now and like just enter something into the chat box. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm from here. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Tampa, Florida. I'm from New York, from Miami, wherever it is. I already see people like even unsolicited telling folks where they're from. So thanks so much. It's always great to get engagement and to meet other marketers. Also, we do have a question and answer. So the Q&A, as Dave and Liz are presenting, we will be taking our favorite questions and then asking them to Dave and Liz at the end of the presentation. Also within Q&A, as you see people asking questions, you can vote them up to the top. So go ahead and do that as well. And as you all see, there are emoticons or emojis. I just aged myself calling them emoticons at the bottom of the screen. So let us know how you're liking the webinar. There are going to be multiple polls today. I believe 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. We really want all of you to take to engage in the polls. Not only is it great information for Dave, Liz, and the CopyPress team, but it can also really help them craft their presentation and get a better idea of who the audience is, yourselves. And then lastly, in the handout section, there's a great ebook on how to analyze your content. So you can go ahead and download that directly from the handout section right here within the webinar, and we'll also drop a link to it as well. And I think I'm done. So I'm going to hand things off to the both of you, but let's get started with today's SEJ webinar with our partner CopyPress on how to supercharge your keyword research with powerful topic clustering.
Yep. Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
So, I was talking to Lauren before the webinar. Obviously, we are working from our homes. So I'm just putting it out there that I have 2 dogs, 4 ducks, like 5 chickens. And so like there will be animal noises at some point probably. But we'll just like persevere.
Yeah, you have a lot more going on than I do at my house. So we'll see whose dog barks first.
You're not dog sitting anymore?
Nope, just the one dog today.
Right. So
did you say ducks and chickens?
Yeah, we live on like a quasi farm situation now. We can discuss that later. All right. So our topic today is going to be about building clusters and keyword research, right? So keyword research is something that everyone involved with SEO has done at some point. But interestingly to me, even since my early days with SEO, keyword research hasn't inherently changed. It's quite interesting. And so I'm going to talk about the way that at CopyPress we approach keyword research to scale very, very large content programs. And kind of like hopefully a shift in methodology. We're going to share like a low tech way to handle what we're talking about, including a tool I just had created yesterday to help with that we're going to give away. And then kind of the high tech way that we manage it too. So I think regardless of where you are in your career with SEO, you'll take something away from this that will be actionable. So the problem that we're going to kind of discuss is search focused content production is still largely focused on what we'll both call traditional keyword research, and then I'll also call it linear keyword research as we work through this. And so the problem with that is, one, like the immediate problem that we see is bad data, right? If you aren't aware, there was a time when we were able to kind of rely on Google for keyword data numbers, and third-party tools were closer, right? Because we had a lot of third-party data providers that use things like toolbars to get better things like click-through data and better volumes. Today, we have a real problem with data volume and being able to actually suss out what search volumes are. That's why when you go to these different third-party tools, everybody has different numbers. And so this adds a strain to the keyword process. Limited scope, meaning you don't know exactly what you're looking for. I see this a lot with people that we work with that aren't necessarily SEOs, but marketers that are getting into keyword research. And they think, all right, well, just look for, I know what our head term is, so I'll kind of start there. So a limited scope, not knowing where to start with the data, and really a focus on single keyword rather than intent. This is something that's becoming more problematic as well, right? Like it used to be back in the day, singular keywords were more beneficial, but now keywords get kind of split into an intent area. So good examples this morning, I was looking at lat pull down machines to add to my home gym, and I put in lat pull down, and of course I'm getting a bunch of exercise. You add the machine onto that keyword, you get a shopping result with actual product. So intent has become a huge driver, where that would have been something that maybe wasn't as important to us 10 years ago. So like I said, we're going to talk about linear keyword research. And the reason I call it linear is literally what I've always seen people do is get a Excel sheet of keywords that runs in a straight line that you then work through, right? It's the concept of just digging through data to find viable keywords to then use as content. And so as SEOs, we often approach it based on just that list. We sort it by search volume and we work our way down from there. And it just gives us an extraordinarily myopic view of content's real potential, because an article or a page doesn't rank for a single keyword, right? So when you're planning a page based on the values of a single keyword, you're missing the point of what that page's actual potential is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Lauren, I think we're ready to launch that first poll.
Yes, we are. So we're going to launch this right now. Are you happy with your current keyword strategy? There are 4 options. Yes, it's been working well. B, it's okay, but there's room for improvement. C, not really. The ROI isn't there. And D, what keyword strategy? So if everyone can go ahead and vote on the poll, which I see a lot of you are already, like incredibly quickly, we'll go ahead and close it out in just a few. So we already have over 100 responses. If you haven't, 300 responses. So if you haven't voted yet, you better do it now, because we're about to close the puppy down.
Well, while we're waiting on those poll results to come in, I'd actually like to revisit a really good point that Dave made earlier, and that is that traditional or linear keyword research typically focuses on just singular keywords, right? It doesn't focus on things holistically. It doesn't focus on user intent. Dave, could you talk a little bit about how that can actually be bad if you want to keep people on your website for a long period of time, and how it has a negative impact on the overall customer journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think let's go back to that lat pull down scenario, right? So let's say I own an exercise equipment website and I've written some articles on just how to do lat pull downs. The likelihood that it's not a straight apples comparison to say, okay, well, that user is going to go from a lat pull down article to actually purchasing equipment, right? Because not only is the intent different, but the intent within the intent, kind of, so to speak, like a person that just wants info on a lat pull down is probably at the gym wanting to do it, right? So they're not gonna purchase. And so I think what you end up seeing from that is what a lot of people see with their blogs specifically, where you end up getting high bounce rates, right? Somebody came in for a quick answer to something and then they bounce off of the page because the intent does not necessarily align with your actual conversion funnel, right? So what content is coming after that to eventually lead someone to a sale? One thing that somebody brought up in the chat that I'll also say quickly is, yes, everything we're talking about can also apply to SEM or paid search, right? keyword research is utilized on both sides. And I think on both ends, it's far too linear of an approach. So a lot of what I'm talking about when I say things like clusters or an article, you could probably think in terms of ad groups as well, right? Like how you cluster these concepts from an ad group perspective. And then also, I think there's a lot to discuss in terms of like when we're talking about this intent issue in terms of building your negative lists as well, right? I think that's super valuable.
Yeah, those are all really, really good things to keep in mind, especially when you're either, starting out developing a keyword strategy or just trying to elevate it and take it to that next level. Mm-hmm. How are the poll results coming along, Lauren?
They're looking good. Okay, so we have 460 responses. The vast majority, 66%, 303, say that their keyword strategy is okay, but there's room for improvement. And then from there, not really. The ROI isn't there. So they don't necessarily see the ROI in a keyword strategy. 10% say what keyword strategy. So just maybe throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then 6% is yes, it's been working well. So only 6% of respondents say that their keyword strategy is working well.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know the different reasonings, but I think a lot of it probably comes down to labor for the ROI side, which is something we're going to discuss, right? Like keyword research at scale is a labor burdensome process. All right, so we're going to dig into more like just defining what linear keyword research is, because it's important to discuss how things are currently done and show the differentiator that like I propose, right? So your traditional keyword research, let's say you were optimizing a website for an SEO agency. One of the terms you would probably dig into is search engine optimization, right? It's a good term. Has a total volume of 22,200 searchers per month, according to SEMrush, right? So that individual term is great. Like maybe you say, okay, we're going to create a services page, or maybe we're going to optimize our homepage for that singular term, right? Like that's traditionally how we would go and select those terms that we want to optimize for. But the issue is search engine optimization shares 7 of the 10 first page SERP results, meaning the SERP, search engine results page for search engine optimization, has 7 results that match the term what is search engine optimization, right? So these two terms are inherently linked together. And from an intent perspective, you also see that they're leaning towards what I call definitive content, right? So the content for both of these queries is largely trying to define what search engine optimization is. And that topical cluster bucket, whatever you want to call it, is now worth 23,500 monthly searchers a month, right? So like now we see that when we optimize a page for search engine optimization, we should also be optimizing it for what is search engine optimization. And then we keep going and we say, okay, well, SEO is actually the bigger term out of all of them, right? That has 165,000 searchers a month, and that shares 5 of the 10 results with those other 2, right? So as we're building this topical cluster, the search volume is growing and the overall potential ROI is growing. And how we should optimize the content on that page is becoming clearer, right? And this is the issue that we see with traditional linear keyword research. How do you decide what ends up in that bucket, or how do you decide what to cart off into a different article? Very difficult. And so, this could keep going on and on and on. All of these terms that are on this screen can fit into this clustering model, right? Where again, if you just have a list of thousands of keywords, how are you deciding what to break out for individual pages? And I think this is the issue that a lot of people face while they're coming through with their keyword strategy.
Right. And I'd actually like to pause on this screen here for just a minute, because one of the most common mistakes we see marketers make is they focus all of their attention, their time, their resources on creating content for top of funnel keywords to drive that website traffic. On the surface, that makes sense, But it's often also at the expense of creating any content around keywords that have a lower search volume. And those are often the keywords that people at the bottom of the funnel or at the very end of the customer journey are actually searching for. So on this page, we do see some keywords that have a much lower search volume than on some of the previous slides we went through. Dave, in your experience, is there a certain search volume threshold marketers should be paying attention to if they want to create content that's actually worthwhile?
So I think it's going to be dependent on industry, vertical type of business, right? So if you're in a B2C space, specific like volumes are going to be pretty important because your conversion rates are going to be lower, right? So if you have a 1% conversion rate on site, which would be awesome, then you're going to need some volume in order to push volume. Whereas if you're a B2B website or somebody who's in lead gen and your actual conversions are worth way more on an individual basis, less volume can come through. So I think what you're looking at is really building out an ROI calculation of what kind of volume based on my conversion rates do I need, right? That's going to be different per website and per vertical. Based on my conversion rates on my site that I know, what volumes do I need for this content or ad group or whatever to actually yield, right? So this isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. And I also think this is where keyword research also veers off. People are just looking at those volume numbers and not thinking about intent and ROI for what they're necessarily going after.
Definitely. And that makes sense. It's going to be different for every industry. It's going to be different depending upon what your goals are and where your customers are at in that journey.
Yep, for sure. So we talked about the issue with linear keyword research when you're trying to, like, you have, like, the example we looked at was all of these really high volume keywords, and like, that's awesome. But probably the bigger issue with the linear keyword approach and what Liz, we just discussed with volumes is we're leaving a lot of money on the table, right?
Yeah.
So here's an example of a list of keywords that around employee contracts. So examples, samples, templates, right? All of these keywords, the ones that are highlighted, are ones that maybe seem unique enough to create individual content, but the search volumes wouldn't, right? Like a search volume of 20 isn't something I'm going to pick out and be like, oh, we should really write a piece of content for this. Because when you get into the actual, that's monthly search volume, then if I rank number one for it, I'm getting maybe 25%, 33% of that traffic. And then with a conversion rate, this becomes a poor thing. But what we notice on the next slide is that, you know, if we start to actually cluster these concepts together, right? So this was run through our system, and we found 16 keywords around that sample employment contracts general topic that came together. This is actually worth 330 monthly visitors, right? So clustering is really like, you know, you've always heard of like head and tail and mid-tail keywords. A lot of the times tail keywords is not an accurate description because it can actually be a head cluster, right? It's just people searching for these things in different ways. And it may even be that some of these, what you called long tail in the past, are really variants of a head term, like we looked at with SEO and what is search engine optimization. So again, the concept here isn't just how do you know what ROI to get, but there's likely items in your keyword research that because it's such a labor intensive slog to go through all of these keywords, you have simply missed opportunities because the individualized keywords look like they are not worth your time. Whereas if you took a clustered mentality of, hey, these are interrelated words that should go together, they would actually lead up to something that'd be worth the expense of putting it into content or, again, ad groups, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that even those keywords with a smaller search volume do add up over time using this method. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we are ready to launch another poll question.
Awesome. Launching away. So one moment. I'm having a little bit of an issue. Okay, here it is. What what is the biggest challenge you're facing with your keyword strategy? A, lack of time or internal resources. B, unsubstantial website traffic ROI. C, not enough experience. Or D, poor direction or execution. So please go ahead and fill this in. And I'm sure Liz and Dave have some topics that they'd like to go over when discussing this.
Yeah. I mean, these are all really common challenges that we see. But if there is a bigger issue that you're facing right now with your keyword strategy, definitely drop that in the chat. I mean, I think Dave and I are both very interested in just seeing where everyone is at with their keyword strategy today. And that'll help us sort of customize the rest of the webinar for you.
Amazing. So we already have over 400 responses. Would you all like for me to go through them?
Yes.
Sure, let's hear.
Let's do it. All right. So the majority, 36%, say lack of time or internal resources is the biggest challenge. And then 29%, not enough experience, right? So hopefully there's some learnings going on here today for those that are chiming in at that 29 to 30%. 21% unsubstantial website traffic or ROI from their keyword strategy. And then 14% poor direction or execution.
Okay, so really, really a mix of different reasons here. But the good news is that as we go through the rest of this webinar, we are going to talk about each of these challenges, and we're going to provide some tips to help you overcome them. Before we dive into that, I'm going to have Dave talk a little bit about some of the issues we see with linear keyword research and that approach in general, and how those contribute to some of these common pain points.
Yeah, so, again, to kind of wrap up what we just discussed with linear keyword research, one, results in a waste and redundancies in your content strategy, right? If you're going through and hand picking keywords that you think are meaty based on volumes and not taking a clustering approach where you're kind of seeing how they fit together, you could end up creating the same content, right? Or content that could have been folded into one piece or should be folded into one piece and actually wasting money. So that leads to inaccurate ROI modeling and forecasting. Since you don't know what the actual potential ROI is, since you're basing it on limited data, you're going to have an inaccurate ROI model. Requires significant labor to scale correctly. Again, depending on what your website is, maybe you're like, well, look, I'm a 10-page website. I don't have a ton of keyword research to do. But, if you're playing in spaces or you're definitely driving a content strategy, it takes a ton of labor, even clustering. If you don't have a tech stack set up for it, takes a ton of labor, right? Like linear clustering, all of it takes people figuring things out to then put the strategy together. And then it increases the possibility of poor data accuracy from third-party tools, right? If you're putting all of your eggs in this one basket that is based on data for one keyword, you're just really putting yourself at risk that data and the volumes are wrong. And so now all of your ROI calculations are wrong. Where with the clustering methodology, the idea, it's almost like a mutual fund versus a stock situation. You have your risk spread across more terms. And so the likelihood that all the volumes are incorrect or wildly incorrect is less.
Right. So, I mean, it's pretty clear that these issues can lead to some of those bigger challenges we just discussed in our poll that we launched. But what solutions does topic clustering actually provide?
Yeah. So as we move now, so we've discussed the problem of linear keyword research. The solution's clustering. So it minimizes waste and gives you clear ideas on how to group keywords into content pieces, right? So, there's things like content harmony and whatnot today that can kind of help you get a hold on those ideas of like what keywords should go into content. But clustering can really give you an idea before you even start the content creation process and when you're forecasting your model, what you should be looping together. Like I said, results in better forecasting model to account for potential traffic a piece can generate and get a better idea of like, well, if content costs X, am I getting an ROI of Y based on modeling out the volumes? Decreases the cost of keyword research. Now, this is based on having some kind of process or tech stack built out around clustering, right? I am very clear on the idea that if you're manually doing clustering, manually doing clustering has its own issues because you're trying to use a human's interpretation of intent to decide how these things should be together. That doesn't really work. But yeah, I mean, you need to figure out some kind of tech stack for it. And we're going to talk about a low tech and a high tech way to kind of manage this concept. And again, it dilutes the potential effects of poor third party volume accuracy. So, if you have a cluster with 100 keywords in it, those keywords could all have incorrect volumes, but you're getting a better generalized idea of what that topic is worth than, again, like everything being inherently with one keyword.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, better forecasting, decreased costs, more accurate data, that all sounds great. Who would not love that? But let's quickly recap and just compare linear keyword research side by side with topic clustering.
Yep. So difference, keywords, we're looking at a linear focus. Again, just working your way down a sheet, but also kind of linear from the perspective of a one-to-one keyword to content or pages, whereas clusters is a holistic focus, right? We're looking at how the keywords themselves interplay with each other, and then also looking at how we group them into pieces of content and create a robust piece of content or a robust ad group. Keywords, hard to estimate traffic and ROI for a myriad of reasons. Clusters, easier to estimate traffic and ROI. Keywords negates natural language processing and other categorization ranking factors, right? So traditional keyword research does not play well with the concept of intent. Why does this exist? And what does the reader want? Where clusters really start to give us an idea of, like we looked at the cluster with SEO. We saw immediately what is search engine optimization being an option that should be in that cluster, which means that content should likely be definitive in nature. So the keyword clustering itself gives us an idea of where that content should go before we even start writing it. Much harder to do from a keyword perspective.
Well, at CopyPress, we do use some advanced machine learning programs to speed up our workflow. But for someone who is just dipping their toes in the water, they are just maybe interested in playing around with the topic clustering approach. What is the easiest way for them to get started?
Yeah, so we're going to run through really quickly a low-tech approach to clustering. This is still going to be somewhat labor-intensive, right? Because it's low-tech, right? So it's going to be somewhat labor-intensive, but it's like a quick hack that I think will serve people well. Specifically, if you're doing 10, 20 blog posts a month, this could be a really easy way to kind of cluster your concepts and to get better forecasting. So I'm going to share my screen and run through in real time how we would do this. And then I'll share a tool that I built to help everybody with this concept. All right, so we're looking at SEMrush right now, and I already pre-loaded the keyword data for SEO, right? So on whatever tool you're using, it's similar, right? So Ahrefs has the same kind of setup. Moz has the same kind of setup. What I'm going to look for on this page is I want to go down to the actual SERPs. And again, Ahrefs has similar data set where the SERPs are listed. And what we're going to start doing is looking through these, and you can see that these articles rank for obviously more than one keyword. They don't just rank for SEO. They rank for, this top one from Google ranks for almost 17,000 keywords. So what I do is, one way to quickly do this hack would be look for the URL in the top 10 that has the least number of keywords, which actually is Search Engine Journal. And I would go from there, click on URL keywords. And now I've got all the keywords that article from Search Engine Journal ranks for. And I can export that list, right? So that's a really quick hack, is find the top 10, find the article that has the least, because the reason I'm going for the least is this is a huge disparity between the search engine journal article and the google.com article. So the likelihood is that there's a bunch of noise in here, right? So if we go into that article, you'll actually see there's a lot of noise. People also search for "This Is How We Do It," right? Montel Jordan dance song. So there's a to do, right? There's noise in this list. So a really quick way to grab a cluster: search the main keyword you're looking for, go to the top 10, and then find in that top 10 the one that has the least amount. That's probably going to be the most drilled in list that you can grab. It's still going to have noise in it. I'm going to show you another method to get rid of the noise, but that's a quick way to kind of do clustering very quickly. Now, another way to do it takes a little more time, but this is going to give you the best clusters, would be to start going through these URL keywords and exporting the data as CSVs. Right? So what I'm doing here now is exporting all 17,000 keywords from that first article, and then I would work my way down the list, right? And then what I did was I built y'all a tool that we will share, I think, after this screen, where you will actually upload these files. So like these were all files I already downloaded for this presentation. So we're downloading all of these. And what it's going to do once I'm done, it's going to actually merge, go through all of those different pages and the URLs I downloaded, and only give us back a merged file where all of the keywords are found across all of the different pages, right? So it's killing all the noise out of there. It's only delivering us back a clean version of keywords that exist on every single page. This should be a very clean signal-free, noise-free signal. So let's look at what that data looks like.
Yeah, and this is something that we'll also send out in an email after this presentation. So keep an eye out for that. But we want to make sure everyone has access to this tool.
Sorry. So as you can see here, SEO search, right? It's a really clean list. These all look like they're inherently related to it. And so like, while this is a time, so this would allow you to go through your keywords, grab your biggest head terms, put them into a tool, and then quickly download those pieces and turn them into clusters. If you're using Ahrefs, you can make this work. With their export, you just have to change the column to search volume instead of volume, or any other tool. Just make sure that keyword columns marks keyword, and the volume one is marked search volume. It will combine as many files, I think, as you put in there. We've tested it up to 10. We just wrote this yesterday, so if it breaks, right, free tool. So it is what it is. But if it breaks, we will fix it. But just a really simple way to get through the concept of clustering without being high tech, right? Is just use the tools that you have, use the concept that, content that has been written really well for a topic should have a natural cluster kind of footprint. And then this tool helps you clean out the noise from that, right? Exactly. So there are low-tech ways to manage it. Again, you're still going to have labor involved with this concept, but you are not going to necessarily have the same amount of labor as somebody going through all the keywords and trying to figure out what goes where or with what.
Exactly. And with that, I think that we are ready to launch another poll.
Well, go back one screen. Yep. So you can find that tool that I just put up at www.copypress.com/cluster. You'll go get a password page, tool for the number 4 webinar. And we'll email this out afterwards as well. But if you wanted to mess with it now and bring it up, copypress.com/cluster, tool, the number 4 webinar is the password. And then you can test out running that. But I think that is going to be something that will really help people leave the webinar today and begin messing with clusters, as long as you have SEMrush, Ahrefs, or Moz data, whatever kind of data. Just make sure you make the columns keyword and search volume.
Yeah, something that'll save you a little bit of time at least.
Yep.
All right, now we are ready for the next poll question.
Awesome. And that was copypress.com/cluster, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. That link in here. Or maybe it's unlinked. So next poll question. Opening up right now. What tools have you used to aid in your keyword research? A, SEMrush, or previously known as SEMrush. B, Hrefs. C, SpyFu, or D, other. And if you use another tool, and if you've used another tool in the past to help with your keyword research, just drop that in the comments. That way Liz and Dave can go over them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say we know that there are so many free and paid tools that are designed to help with keyword research. So also let us know in the comments maybe why you like certain tools or you dislike others. A lot of professionals use multiple tools to get all of the data that they need for their keyword strategy. So it can be helpful to know what the pros and cons are so that you can put together a system that really works for you.
Very cool. And I just saw someone had to mention ChatGPT.
Already.
Yeah. Amazing. So cool. Seeing a lot of Moz, seeing a lot of Bright Edge, more than I thought. Oversuggest, Answer the Public, more Moz, Keyword Planner, everything. So this is awesome. Keywordtool.io. Amazing. So let's see in terms of the poll results. We have the heavyweight contender here is SEMrush. So 61% have used SEMrush in the past. 20% Hrefs, 3% SpyFu, and then 18%, almost the same as Hrefs, use something else and something other than SEMrush, Hrefs, or SpyFu. So super cool.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of options out there, especially if you want to get started with this low-tech approach to topic clustering. However, if your goal is to really save time and free up internal resources, especially in the long term, you might be more interested in learning about a high-tech approach to topic clustering. So Dave, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about kind of the system that we built at CopyPress. And I saw somebody in the chat discuss they're not a strong developer, so they want a high-tech solution. But kind of the cool thing with where we are with machine learning today, you don't need to. We're going to share a resource or a couple of resources where you can go and find developers to aid with it. But look, I actually designed this system and I am not a developer, right? I think that what's cool about where we are, it's really easy to throw up AWS architecture and kind of scale out machine learning quickly. And then you have a lot of front end services like we've used Retool or Airtable, where you can manipulate the data that lives on AWS without building a front end necessarily. So, I wouldn't let a lack of development skills keep you from building out your own system to manage this. So high-tech approach, the issue we've discussed is getting a full bucketed picture of everything, right? So we actually built the system I'm going to discuss because we have a client we built about 25,000 articles for over the last 3 years. And at that volume of content, we had a keyword universe of millions upon millions upon millions of keywords that we needed to sort through and then categorize, right? Because that's really where the issue of linear keyword research hit us hard. When you hit that scale, you're like, oh, we can't do this with humans. So when we began using this method at CopyPress, we tried to employ a straightforward Python scripting to compare SERP data sets. The job was too big, so we had to. So the job was too big. And so that's where we had to go with machine learning. So originally we started off with trying to brute force it. Like my concept, again, not a developer. I was like, oh, we'll just compare the SERP results from this keyword against this keyword against all the keywords, and we'll come back, right? And then that was before I really understood machine learning. This was years ago. And then we started looking machine learning, and that really solved our problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we use the machine learning we use. Best way to think about it is like Netflix, right? And the model it uses to help people find movies that are something they'd want to watch, right? So like we're taking data and we are building clusters within the data to help say, okay, this SERP is similar to this SERP. So an incorrect way to think about it is percentage similarity. It's more of proximity similarity, right? If it's on a grid, and we'll show a graph in a minute, but like as those things become more clumped together, that is how we decide that keywords are similar to each other from a clustering model, and then you can, move that cluster model around to make it more similar. So we run the top SERP results through our model to determine how similar they are. And then we use another machine learning process to actually bucket them. So the first piece is we pull in all of the SERPs and then we actually cluster them. So this is a clustering model example on the screen, right? Where depending on how sensitive you set the clustering, that green cluster, as an example, could break into 5 or 6 more clusters. Or you could desensitize it. Everything could be in one cluster. But the model, if you want to think about the X and Y axis on here, would be things like the articles that are in those SERPs, right? Where they rank, things like that. So that way we can see, what is the similarity in rankings between different keywords and how do those SERP makeups kind of go together. So the tech stack for us and the way it works is like, a couple of methodologies. The one that we like the most is you actually put your own domain in, and then we get a bunch of competitor domains. We pull in all the keywords that rank for those domains, yours and your competitors, and we build a SERP database. We then go through that SERP database and see what other domains are repeating that you may not think are competitors, but actually are contextual competitors. And we expand that list and we bring in all their SERP data. And now we just have a huge SERP database that we then store along with the keyword data and put it on AWS. And then we run our first modeling to say, okay, like where do these all fit on that, like that logistical regression kind of model. And then we run a clustering model to say, okay, like, well, how do these cluster together? Okay. The clustering and the logistical regression modeling, all that stuff is just basic Python libraries that are pretty easy to manage. And again, this can all be run off of AWS. Or if you want to run it on like a Firebase setup or on Google Cloud or something, like, again, very easy to kind of get things started and get them moving. The biggest thing you need is like an API connector to a data source. For us, we use data for SEO because some of the others are prohibitively expensive to get the data sets across. And that would be the one downside potentially of building this out. You need kind of the economic use case. For us, it's there because we do such high volumes of this. But, again, our methodology is very straightforward. We are comparing the SERP structures for keywords to each other to then plot them on a graph and then cluster them together, right? So we get an idea of what is similar, and that clustering can then be adjusted to be more sensitive or less sensitive is the way to think about it.
Yeah, so definitely a few options there for how to build out that clustering tech stack. And it looks like we are ready to launch the final poll question.
Awesome. Launching away. Who is in charge of your keyword research and strategy? Is it A, a dedicated internal team member or members? B, third party or agency? C, no one manages our keyword strategy. Absolutely no one. Or then D, I do it all by myself. I do it all myself. So we'll go ahead and let everybody go ahead and answer. Any thoughts on this topic, Dave and Liz?
I am hoping that you all have a dedicated team, but I know that that's not how it always goes, is it? It seems like companies and organizations are always very invested in the ROI they get from different marketing initiatives, but they're not always hiring people to specifically manage their keyword research or that strategy component. A lot of times we do see that it gets tacked on to an existing role, or it's just very unclear who is actually in charge of it. So it can get really messy.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to think about here is I still think that as specifically SEOs, right? Because I think the PPC side of the business does a better job. As SEOs, we do a piss poor job of forecasting data and telling people what kind of ROI they may potentially get off of the work that we do. Maybe we do traffic forecasting, but not actual forecasting of value that we think is going to be generated or created. So that issue, I think, lends itself to why we can't get the resources we need. Whereas if you could actually if you use those resources to generate those kind of C-level reports, I think things would be going well.
Yeah, if you were able to actually predict what the ROI is going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. So I'm going to go ahead and read through the results we have here. 54% came in at I do it all myself, all of the keyword research and strategy. 37% have a dedicated internal team member or members. So good for everybody there. 7% a third party or agency. And then 3% say nobody. That's 15 people. 3% of 430 responders say no one manages our keyword strategy. So, yep.
Well, for those of you who, maybe are looking for a little bit of extra help when it comes to your keyword research and strategy, possibly to fill those gaps that not having a dedicated internal team leaves you with, let's take a look at some of the tools you can actually use to start building a high-tech model.
Yeah. So can you still hear me okay, Liz?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So these are models that we've worked with. There's tons of different models that people have brought up. From my perspective, what I'm looking at is APIs to dial into, right? So we're still talking about building your high-tech system. With your low-tech system, whatever system you have works well. For high-tech, I've worked with the SEMrush API, which can be difficult to work with and is sometimes cost prohibitive, quite honestly. We work with data for SEO because it is the most flexible data set that we found, which makes it less cost prohibitive. And then Ahrefs is another one. Again, I find its API to be limiting, but I think there are tons of different options, right? Like, really, you need to dial into like whatever your organization is probably already utilizing. You don't want to make huge waves because, again, the volumes are so different across some of these tools. If you've already set expectations on one data set, you probably don't want to go changing them. But I think, Moz is they're all interesting data sets. I would really suggest before you just say we're going to use one, look at the APIs and make sure they have the data you actually want. Because some of them are structured in a way where it's hard sometimes to get the polls that you would necessarily need. Or again, cost prohibitive to run all of that data. So that's a good place to start for data anyway.
Yeah, and those are all good things to keep in mind as you're trying to choose what tool is going to work the best for you. But uncovering the data is just the first piece of the puzzle. We also need to actually make sense of all of the keywords and the information we gather. And that's where machine learning really comes into play. So Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about Kaggle?
Yeah, so Kaggle is like, if anybody remembers what 99 Designs used to be, they used to be able to set up a competition and get work back and then choose the winner. Kaggle is a similar situation to that, but it's for machine learning and data scientists. So you can actually go there and put together a competition, say, okay, I'll give whatever amount of money to the winner, and you will get a bunch of like solutions to your data problem back. So that way you'll be able to get actual code written for you by a data scientist to utilize on this process. But another place to go is just go to Upwork and find a developer that can help you here. Machine learning generally runs on Python, and Python's generally a language people know. There are existing libraries that can already be utilized. It's just a very easy setup to get involved with quickly.
Yeah, there are plenty of resources out there as long as you dig around a little bit. And on that note, let's kick off the Q&A session.
Awesome. Awesome. And thanks for the reference of what 99 Designs used to be. I haven't used
Yeah,
that.
I went and looked recently, Lauren, because I was like, oh, may want to do something with it. It's completely different now.
Yeah.
There's no more competition. It's very sad.
Doesn't sound nearly as cool.
Awesome. So let's get started. We've had a lot of questions come in. I'm going to just pretty much start from the top. Do you have any suggestions for how to organize cluster content on a website to improve the user experience, rankings on SERPs, and overall site authority?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this kind of goes back to we have like a content marketing pyramid we talk about where, right, when you're talking about user intents that are like definitive content, how to, that kind of content going generally in a knowledge base or resource center, right? That then leads into your sales pages, which are more of your commercial and transactional queries, with kind of your head transactional commercial query going on your homepage. And so I think, as you're building out your clustering model, we've talked about intent over and over. Intent's really, really important as a part of identifying those clusters. And once you have that intent figured out, the game plan is, all right, like from a navigational perspective and a content perspective, where do those intents go? Like you don't want definitive content like that SEO example. If SEO really should be on a definitive page, if I'm an agency, do I really want to optimize my homepage for SEO? Because that's not what's showing up in the results, right? It's a bunch of articles about SEO. So like, then, okay, cool. So I create that definitive content because I'm an agency. How do I work with that flow? Well, you should have an ebook on that page that then leads to like, 10 tips for SEO or whatever that puts them in your email funnel. I think that's, really thinking about things at that level is what I think separates, like your old school traditional SEOs to like this new wave of SEOs that are taking content strategy into play as well.
100%. And then we had a lot of questions coming in about cannibalization. So if you have to target too many keywords that fall under the same topic cluster, do you run the risk of creating pages that essentially cannibalize each other? And what tips do you have to avoid overall keyword cannibalization?
Yeah, I mean, I think clustering exists to keep you from cannibalizing, right? Like it will help you make sure that you don't. But again, depending on how sensitive you set everything, things can come out. So what we've seen pretty regularly is when you roll out a new content strategy based on clustering, a third of the keywords will crush it, a third will do okay, and a third will just be nothing will happen to them, right? And so it's like a concept of going back to your content. And I think this is going to be crazy important over the next 5 years, re-optimizing your content, like not looking at your content as a one-off throwaway thing that you're just like, oh, we did it, it's done. No, get back in there, figure out. So you're gonna have content that you should marry together, right? Because they are potentially cannibalizing each other. I think again, that's where products like Content Harmony and some of these brief building tools are super helpful.
Yeah.
But get in there and go back to re-optimize. I think that's the best way to handle it. But I think if you're doing good clustering, it should eliminate some of the cannibalization. And then the second level to killing the cannibalization is actually re-optimization, in my opinion.
Very cool. Very cool. The next question that comes in about topic clusters is, how many topic clusters should the average brand focus on? And do these clusters remain consistent, or should they change over time?
Yeah. Interesting question. It's like no one size fits all, I think. Right. Like, so when you say average brands, like CopyPress may be able to focus on a certain amount of content versus, like a website, I don't know, the New York Times, they're going to have a completely different like ability on a content level to focus on it. I think this is where ROI comes back into play, right? You have to figure out, how does your content convert, how much value it drives, and then build from there. So like, we rarely go into an agreement with a client where we'll be like, all right, we're going to create 10,000 pieces of content randomly for your site, right? There'll be like a 90-day period or six months, right, to actually wait for it to rank, where we are creating a limited amount of content that we know the keyword clusters are actually valuable, and see how that actually pans out from a traffic creation standpoint and a conversion perspective, and then map out a larger engagement. And I think that ROI and what you're actually making off of the cost of the content is what needs to answer that secondary question of how many you should focus on. From a changing perspective, the reality, I think a changing cluster would just mean more keywords maybe coming into play for that cluster, but a cluster should, generally speaking, be evergreen, right? Like the topic SEO, what is SEO? All of those things are going to be the same, but maybe something else comes into play long term and gets added to it. So I only see clusters increasing in value. Now, if your business model changes or you have a seasonal business, that's a different conversation altogether. Those are generally difficult issues to handle from an SEO perspective anyway.
Cool. So had some pretty interesting questions come in. The first one, this is also about clusters to a degree, but
that's good. That's the topic.
Exactly. The first one is about, so if you're going to go away from tools, or maybe in addition to tools and volume, and actually sit down with your customers in a focus group, or maybe monitor customer service phone calls utilizing a tool like Gong AI or whatever, what questions would you ask your customer base in a focus group to extract topic clusters? Or would you recommend that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. And so what we've been actually doing is talking to salespeople a lot. So not even doing the route of, actually, when we hired Jeremy Rivera for us, and one of the coolest things he did was actually come on and like, we were like, hey, why don't you put together an SEO plan? He came straight to me and was like, give me all the sales materials, sales decks, and let me talk to your sales team. And then you talk to them about basically their FAQ book, right? Like, what are the frequently asked questions you're getting? We also use a system called Otter AI, which transcribes sales calls, right, as they're happening in real time. So then you can go back through and index the recurring keywords that are coming up, right, to get an idea for like, well, yeah, how are people talking about this product? Because that's a disconnect too, right? Like your C-level guy, this is the keyword that matters to me. And it's like, well, that's not what any of the product people or people buying this thing actually call it. You know what I mean? Or discuss it or talk about it. But that also, not just about keywords, it's about tone and voice too. Like, how do people talk about your brand, right? What's the conversational nature of it? Like, what's the voice of our brand? Like, I think you get that from that sales department, even more than like necessarily like a sit down group, right? That you're going to talk to the customers with, because it's happening in the natural conversation of that sales conversation has the sales guy talking about the actual product, and then the person telling you their problem, which is the inherent thing you're trying to solve through the content as well.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I'd also say anyone on your customer service team, whoever is interacting with your consumer, your customer the most, they're going to have those insights for you.
Absolutely. And that expands the ROI question too, right? Because if the content that you're providing and you're creating can find a solution to the issues that a prospective customer or current customer may have, then that content can be used in nurturing campaigns even outside of someone finding it via Google, right? Whether it's email or social or whatever. So then there's the value of retention and sales right there. If that content can play a hand in that, then that's a predictable ROI that you can utilize long term as well, in addition to what you're getting from the benefit of search.
Yep, for sure.
100%.
Next question that comes in, we have a couple minutes left, is about internal linking within content clusters. Can you provide some hints on how to internally link the cluster content within itself and within other clusters for better performance?
Yeah, so I think what you're still looking at is like your natural language processing stuff, so what we do is we'll take a cluster and put it into a category, and then use that category to actually drive the internal linking, right? So like the SEO one might be in a services category, which we are then linking to other items, right? Or you can create a parent-child relationship. So like SEO and then keyword research is another article that you're going to want to link to from those two places. So I think it comes to creating what another issue people have is creating a content calendar that isn't just about dates and times, but really a thought out flow for, well, how does this content fit on the website? What should it interlink to? And how should it interact with the other content pieces, and mapping that out before actual production.
Amazing. And then the last question, which is probably the most popular question that we had within the chat box, is, can you please tell me the password of copypress.com/cluster?
Yeah, it's cool for webinar. It seemed like some people were having issues with that password. It's likely that there's a bug, right? And we really just rolled it out. Like, I had them code it in the last 12 hours. So
amazing.
I will tool the number 4 webinar. But we're going to send an email out to everyone that signed up for this webinar with a link to it again, and the password as well. But I do think it's a cool tool. I couldn't find anything existing from an Excel tool or anything else that kind of does that combined stuff. So hopefully people use it. Yeah, I mean, people are saying it works. It should work. There may be some lag on the server and stuff. We didn't like beef anything up for people utilizing it. So just keep messing with it. You'll get in there.
Awesome. The demand is really high right now. So
yeah.
Well, that's good.
Awesome. So Dave and Liz, it's been great hosting both of you. Dave, it's great talking again. And then Liz, it's been great meeting you. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to our other upcoming webinars with CopyPress. Really excited.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. I think this is incredibly timely from a topic perspective, and especially with planning out the rest of the year, and especially after like Google's been rolling out what it has. And for all of you that will be here for our next webinar, it's going to be on Wednesday, February 8th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, on enterprise SEO, 7 use cases to level up website optimization with website intelligence, sponsored by Illumar. So Dave and Liz, it's been a pleasure again. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, the video as well with presentation will be provided to all registrants and attendees from today's webinar, along with a lot of the questions that were entered that we didn't get a chance to go over on the Q&A. We'll be sending them over to Dave and Liz. So Dave and Liz, you all can stay up all night and answer those questions, and we'll email everybody tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning with the answers. So thanks again so much. And thanks again for all of you that attended and stuck around for today's SEJ webinar with Dave Snyder and Liz Groth. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.